On January 5th, Georgia will be holding a special runoff election for its two hotly contested Senate seats.
Georgia, all eyes are on you again.
With Republican Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler seeking re-election, and Democrats John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock looking to flip the Senate.
We have the power to make history as Georgia voters.
Now, more than ever, we have to stand up and defend that basic idea that the only way to succeed is to rise together.
The stakes could not be higher, except they are. Every day, thousands of Americans are being killed by the deadly coronavirus or threatened by oppressive criminal justice and immigration policies, all of which President-elect Joe Biden is dedicated to tackling in his first 100 days in office. But to do so, he'll need a cooperative Senate majority. Hi, I'm Maria Teresa Kumar, president of Voto Latino. Here to discuss this historic election and its potential implications is a panel of activists, actors, humanitarians, and political experts. We're only a couple of days away from the election, and though voter registration ended on December 7th, the important part of the process still remains: voting. So I'd like to introduce an actor and activist. Join me in welcoming Wilmer Valderrama.
Hey, what's up? So happy to be here. What's up, Fuse? Hey, Maria.
So Wilmer, the Georgia runoff elections are going to have huge implications for the next couple of years. What does the January runoff election mean to you?
I mean, it's an extension, right? It's the next phase of an election. And I think a lot of times we forget because we're being kind of traditionally been taught that, you vote for the president, but we also forget about the midterm elections. We also forget about, multiple opportunities throughout the presidency to continue to vote individuals that represent us as a community and speak on behalf of our needs and likes and most importantly, interests.
Many voters believe that their job was done back in November with the general election. Why is it important for people in Georgia to come out and vote on January 5th?
When you look at this election and people saying, okay, we did it, that, or whether this is a win or a loss for you, ultimately, there's lots of work to be done. Governing specifically from Washington is not a simple task, and it truly does take a village. But, the village has to be on the same page and they have to share the same values and respect that we all have for our country. And if we're going to move forward together, then we have to have the like-minded be in office.
I'm going to ask you this. Why is it important for a Senate that's representative of everybody to be in D.C.?
We have a major responsibility to continue to shape our country, not just for ourselves, but the way for what we represent on a global scale. And so the people have to be represented. The people themselves, they have to be in leadership in order for us to have a more accurate conversation about needs and interests. In order to do that, we have to have a level of leadership that really can truly speak on behalf of the community from a not only relatable perspective, but from an origin story, someone that understands the DNA of who we are.
Why is it important for the Latinx community to take advantage of this opportunity to vote in the Georgia runoff?
I think it's important that we do our part, right? We're very grateful to this country and we're very grateful what it represents to us, but even more grateful of the American dream. And part of that is us showing up for the country that's given us so much. As Latinos, we also deserve a seat at the table, right? And as Latinos, we also have a major contribution to the national community and to the well-being of this country. We wear the uniforms, we're doctors, we show up, we're first responders. And I think that as also citizens and residents of this country, we also contribute to not just the DNA, but the momentum, right? Of where we're going next as people and as a society. And that's crucial and that's critical and that's urgent.
Now, Wilmer, you and I have been doing this for a minute, and we're constantly telling people that it's super important for them to vote. Tell them why it's important for them to give love and nurture to our democracy. Why should they vote?
When you ask that question, I get filled with passion and emotion because I look back at the many generations of our people and our brothers and sisters who never had the gift of having a voice, had an opportunity to participate in decisions that affect them directly. And I look at our brothers and sisters of the African American community, and when they gain their ability to vote, when women were able to get their ability to vote, when immigrants were allowed to vote. You think about what was sacrificed for us to have the gift of having a contribution to the decision making and choosing who was going to speak on our behalf. That's important to listen to. A generation that grows up thinking that what is one vote going to do is very unfortunate. Very unfortunate, because your ancestry has sacrificed too much for just the mere common sense of knowing that we deserve to vote. It fills me up with joy to see all of these young people and in this entire generation finally understanding that this country is theirs and is theirs to shape. And the only way that we're going to shape it is by participating in the longstanding tradition of the people coming together and choosing who their leaders are. Leadership is nothing without the people to be served. And that's why voting is important.
Wilmer, thanks for making the time for us today.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Think about how far we've come in the American South. Think about how far we've come in the great state of Georgia, that we are hosting 2 United States Senate runoffs to determine control of the United States Senate.
2020 was a historic election. Over 140 million Americans cast their vote for the future of the country, and several states, including Georgia, flipped their presidential support and cast their electoral vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Not since the 1992 election of Bill Clinton has Georgia voted in favor of a Democratic candidate. And, like in 1992, this year's race was fiercely competitive. 49.5% of voters voted for Biden-Harris, and 49.3% voted for Trump-Pence. Thanks to Georgia's BIPOC youth, Biden-Harris were able to literally secure the election and head to the White House. Leading that historic voter registration and turnout was an assembly of voting advocates led by Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight and organizations like Voto Latino. But with a post-primary election hangover threatening turnout for the runoff, voting activists are hard at work. Joining us next are Georgia voting activists Teresa Granda-Malaver and Jordan Gaiten. Thank you for joining me. Patricia, let me ask you, what does the January runoff mean to you?
So the January runoff is important to me for 2 reasons. One, being an immigrant, coming to the U.S., understanding how important it was to get my citizenship, how important it was to vote. The 2016 elections, as chaotic as it was my first time voting at 18, and then it was actually my grandmother's first time voting after being in the U.S. for over 40 years. Also, just being from Georgia, growing up in Georgia and just having so much love for this state and how much growth they've had. I actually went to school in Columbia University, and going up north, I realized that people think that the South is just this monolithic that is never going to change, when in reality there is that diversity, there is that growth happening in terms of people of color and our voices being heard. But that's why this specific January election is really exciting.
So Georgia has experienced Senate races before. Why is this one so different?
We all knew that the runoff was going to happen regardless, because for those that aren't from Georgia, you have to hit that 50% margin to actually win, and then the top 2 would go on. So with Loeffler and Warnock, we definitely knew their race, no one was going to get that 50% since there was over 20 candidates running. And so why it's become so big is because if the Democrats are able to win these 2 races, then Biden will actually be able to ensure that his goals he has actually go forward.
I want to talk a little bit more about Georgia, which has historically voted Republican. Do you feel that there's a shift in the politics in Georgia? And if there is, what do you think is the cause of that?
Even though in the past it has been very red, that we are progressing and we are shifting. In 2018, we really saw that with Stacey Abrams. I think we were all really shocked at how close the margin was of her loss. And I think that's when there was a lot more awareness in voter purging and the voter suppressions that was happening in low income and people of color neighborhoods. And so I think that really showed us that those voices were being diminished, they were being silenced. Moving forward, I do see Georgia changing, but I also don't want to get too comfortable with this one win. I think that now that we're purple, that doesn't mean the fight has ended. If anything, it's kind of like a seed that the universe has given us to ensure we can continue having that motivation to grow.
Georgia, like so many other states, had historic turnout in the general election. How do we guarantee that we'll have the same turnout with this runoff on January 5th?
It's very scary at this point because people that are involved with politics, are involved with activism, know it's coming up. But even just people I've talked to, like my doctors, dentists, they don't even know that's the January 5th, that's the date you have to go out. Keeping that information flowing, continuing those text banks, those phone banks, making sure that people know, because even if you don't have a friend that's directly in Georgia, someone else might see it and they might share it. The power of social media was so big with this general election, and that it can continue being big in this runoff.
Jordan, what role do different communities of color play for voters in this primary?
I think we represent a majority that's happening in the United States. When these voices come together, we are heard. We are not marginalized. We make changes. We do things that other communities don't. And we don't stand by. And we want to make sure we are represented. In Georgia as well, they're using the drag queen community to do rallies, making sure that it's not always just politics. It's we're bringing some fun to it as well. When all these communities come together, it does make a difference.
How important is it for young people to get involved in this runoff?
The youth vote is very, very important. I definitely saw it. I worked on my first state Senate race here in Georgia with Nikki Merritt. We actually flipped a seat, one of the only seats here in Georgia, from Republican to Democrat. And all of her leaders in her campaign were basically 18 to 25-year-old leaders, some of them still in high school.
Can you tell me what it feels like to see BIPOC voters coming out in such force and have such a massive impact on the direction that the country's heading?
I think having these increased numbers of turnouts of election after election only shows how strong our voices are here in our community. And it continues to show that we care. People marginalize or say, well, this group doesn't really go out and vote, or this group votes this way. And we only get looked at every 4 years when an election comes around. And I think this growing number shows that we do care, and we do want to be noticed, and we do want our voices heard. And not only every 4 years, we want to be continually engaged, continually educated, continually involved. We know our voice matters, and we will continue to show that our voice matters.
Hey, Georgia, we have a momentous occasion ahead of us. We know that this election is going to change the future, and we know we've done it before. In November 2020, it was Georgia that turned the state blue and turned out voters who hadn't participated at levels like this before. We saw a 72% increase in Latino voter participation, a 91% increase in Asian American Pacific Islander participation, and Black voters increased their participation by 20%. And we can do it again. On January 5th, we're electing 2 new U.S. senators, and we have a choice. We can elect senators who have stood by and watched COVID-ravaged communities of color and done nothing, who watched systemic inequities take down our communities and do nothing to change the future. Or we can elect senators who believe in all of us, who will work for all of us, who will address the disparities in COVID, will work to make certain that relief and recovery happen for all of us, and that justice becomes real in the United States for every single person. We have a choice to make, and we need you to make it. Make certain that you cast your ballot by January 5th. Make a plan to vote, and make a plan to vote to change America for the better.
At the heart of this election are a number of issues, including COVID relief, women's rights, immigration, and criminal justice reform.
America is great, not in spite of its diversity, but precisely because of its diversity.
The Affordable Care Act is right up there, along with climate justice and student debt relief. But while President-elect Joe Biden has pledged to work on these issues during his first 100 days in office, bipartisan bickering would derail his efforts and slow urgent relief for all of us. So, it's the day after the election. How would this election impact people on local and national level issues?
Having hopefully 2 senators in Georgia that represent who we actually are here in Georgia. I think it's so important because we can have our voices heard. They will actually go and fight for us at the Senate, and making sure that we get relief for COVID relief, making sure that these marginalized communities are being heard. And I think with Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, they will make sure that our voices are heard. Bills, laws will get passed that will benefit not one community, but all of our communities in the United States.
If the Senate turns in favor of the Democrats, what are some changes that you're looking forward to seeing?
In a world where the Senate is able to be Democrat, I'm just really excited to see a lot of the changes when it comes to immigration and student debt. And I mean, the list could go on in terms of policy that would actually change, but I think that in general, I'm just excited to see an administration that actually listens to you, a president that will actually care about the community and that you can identify with. And even just thinking of Vice President Kamala Harris and how a lot of POC folks can now identify with her, can see themselves in her and see that they can also hold position in the White House. Aside from the policy, me and a lot of other activists, advocates are excited to have a president that's actually going to listen to what they say and not just tweet about it and not really care about what's happening. Because I think that's really reassuring.
The finish line is not on January 5th. The finish line is the 5th of Nevuary. We are never going to be done with waking up our community and showing up.
Jordan, tell our audience, why is it so important to vote?
These past 4 years were very divisive, and I think a lot of people feel that. Having people that look like us, having people that will actually fight for queer rights, Latinx rights, African American rights, everyone that is marginalized, I think that we will now have a voice in the Senate from Georgia.
For those folks that are still on the fence, Patricia, tell our audience, why is it so important to vote?
You should vote for those who can't. It's just the most basic thing that you can do as an American citizen. The fight doesn't even stop with Biden winning. I think we have to continue holding people accountable and putting in the work. And part of that work includes voting in those future elections.
There is an unprecedented amount of bipartisan division in the United States. Now's the time for us to be engaged and involved in our democratic process.
This is a defining moment in American history, and Georgia, you're at the very center of that conversation.
Maybe you're feeling in your heart for the first time in 4 years something that is almost unfamiliar these last 4 weeks. That feeling is hope.
And if you're not a Georgia resident, please remember that while primary elections are important, local elections also have a great impact on your day-to-day life.
To finish up today's conversation, I wanted to drop in and encourage all of you in the state of Georgia to continue to be involved in our democratic process. I know you're likely exhausted from election information, but your fellow citizens across the country are counting on you to help us create the changes that we want to see. So in addition to hitting the polls on January 5th, please reach out to 3 of your loved ones to tell them what is at stake. You can also remind them of the following. The deadline for requesting an absentee ballot has already passed. So if you're not already registered, you'll need to vote in person on January 5th, 2021. If you've already gotten your absentee ballot, please be sure to have it put in the mail ASAP, because votes arriving to counting facilities after January 5th will not be counted. For the rest of us living outside the state of Georgia, our job isn't finished. We need to continue to stay involved by remaining informed on the issues affecting you and your community, and by continuing to participate in both midterm and primary elections. Our voices deserve to be heard. We at Fuse and Voto Latino would like to thank our wonderful contributors, Wilmer Valderrama, Jordan Gaeta, Patricia Granda-Malaver, and our host, Voto Latino President and co-founder Maria Teresa Kumar. Remember, stay informed and stay involved.
It's time to vote right now.
Be sure you show up and make your voice heard. This election is about us.
It is our privilege to show up, and that is our right to have a voice.
Please get out the vote.
Tell everybody you know they need to vote.
So what we gonna do? What we gonna do?
Go and vote, Georgia!
Thank you, Fuse Media, for your commitment to the Latino community through the years. Your work on air and your partnership with Voto Latino you just brought stories and issues to light. We cannot thank you enough. And gracias.